Welcome to On the Scotty Couch, where we meet and chat with amazing people and share their inspiring stories. Today we've got Rick Clement here with us at Scotty HQ. Welcome, Rick. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
We're here in the warehouse at the back of the Scotty's office. It's mid-June, and of course it's raining, so we can hear the rain coming down on the rooftops. Rick, so 16 years in the British Army, I think. Joined at 16. Were you always going to be a soldier? Was that kind of what life was going to be? Was that all mapped out for you at that point?
The only thing I really knew was that I didn't want to go to college, to be honest. I'd got decent GCSEs, so it wasn't an issue of, not really being educated that way. But I just wanted to get out there, I think, start earning money and buy a car and things like that. So I started looking around at potential jobs, and we had a computer program at school what you could put in a few interests and things, and it popped out a list of likely jobs, and mine was like Army number 1, Navy number 2, Air Force number 3, so that was a good signpost. Off I went to the careers office, and that was kind of it from there.
Yeah, just joined up. And 16 years of age then?
Yeah, just 16, straight from school.
What's it like going into the army at 16 years old?
I found it very difficult at first, I must admit. I believe my section commander in training didn't think that I would make it. I was quite shy and stuff, but by the end of it I ended up getting top recruit, so I certainly changed that around and just got used to it. I think in some ways, although being young it's more difficult, it's also easier to be shaped into what they want you to be, so I think it did help in the long run. Yeah,
so you definitely recommend it to youngsters that are considering a career in the military? Give it a go? Absolutely,
it taught me so much. I've got a good family and stuff behind me as well, but second to them, everything I've sort of learned through my life has come from the military, really.
Yeah, and from there, tours of Iraq, Afghanistan. Tell us a little bit more, obviously, about Afghanistan and how that obviously changed your life.
Yeah, I did the 3 operational tours. Ireland I did 3 times. And then Iraq and Afghanistan. Ireland was sort of the back end of the really bad times, if you will. The only real incident we had there was the Omar bomb back in '98. A lot of civilians were killed in, and that was a bit of a baptism of fire at 18 years old. But it also I saw the kind of the help that we gave the public and helped out with casualties, things like that. And I also saw the real change in attitude towards the army after that. Mm-hmm. And I think that really showed me that we could change those places for the better, and we were doing a good job, and we weren't just there to shoot and fight and things like that. Iraq, I was there when in Basra when Saddam's statue was pulled down, so that was, you kind of still see it on the TV from time to time. That was a really sort of significant moment. We did lose one guy over there, one of our medics, a captain, unfortunately, in a vehicle IED. But other than that, it was more of a public order tour with rioting in the city and things like that outside the banks and petrol stations. So again, it was, it wasn't an easy tour, but when Afghan come around, that we knew that was going to be a different kettle of fish, and certainly a much more riskier place. Yeah. At that point, I was a platoon sergeant for Afghanistan, so I'm not thinking it's going to be me. I'm thinking I need to make sure I'm ready to react to if something happens to my boys. And I felt like we were ready. We were put together a bit last minute, my platoon, just the way things panned out. But we'd all gone through all the training, just not all together at times. We went over there, and I think we was there about a month really, and a couple of weeks of that was in Bastion in the main camp, just getting the last minute training. We moved out onto into the forward operating bases, and that's where we started our normal routine, and a normal day-to-day patrol ended up. As you can see, I was quite severely injured. It was just an early morning patrol. The platoon commander had took one team out onto a nearby road or track, if you will, over there, and he was stopping vehicles and people to get an idea of who was passing through the area. and I took the other team out to satellite around and provide protection for them if they came under attack. And you kind of, when you get out there, you taught to avoid channel routes. By that I mean a bridge would be an extreme example of a channel route where the Taliban and such would put an IED on the bridge, knowing full well that you can't get across the river, so you'll cross the bridge. But there's obviously other types like footpaths and the ditches or irrigation ditches at the side of the paths and all sorts of other ones, and so it becomes a bit of a choice where you're going to go and which is the better route. On this particular day there was a building to the right hand side. Buildings were a definite no-go because they could be booby-trapped, doors, windows, walls, floors, roofs, pretty much everywhere. So that was obviously a definite no. There was a footpath next to the building and there was an irrigation ditch just to the left of that. Now I've been sort of told by recent intelligence that the irrigation ditches were quite risky and they'd realised that we were using them quite a lot, so they'd become quite a target for IEDs. So I decided the Valor man at the front, I was confident that he could pick up anything on the path. We only needed to go about 10 to 15 metres along this path before we could hit open ground again. And that's the decision I made to go. Due to fate, luck, I couldn't really tell you, but there was an IED buried underneath. I think it was a pressure plate IED. Whether the two men in front of me, the Valem, which is a metal detector, if you will, that picks up the bombs, and then the guy behind him who was covering the front man, and then myself. I'm not sure if they missed it by millimetres or it was set to go off at a heavier weight, because the commanders carry radios and extra kit and things, so you can sometimes set it off with the extra weight. But for whatever reason I set it off, and it was really strange. It felt like a poof to me, and that sounds really quiet, but it really did sound like that. In reality, it was a loud explosion, and the next thing I knew, I was in the bottom of a small pit, if you will, a crater, and the guys were coming to my aid. I didn't remember feeling much pain at the time, but I knew something was wrong and something had happened. The guys are then obviously giving me morphine and starting to treat me for bleeding and such. I think I was quite lucky that the heat of the blast seared a lot of the bleeding, so that certainly helped keep me alive for longer. And the guys did a fantastic job of getting to me quickly, patching me up, and then carrying me back towards the base to a helipad. As I said earlier, that should have been my job to sort of do the 9-liner, which is the information you give back to call in the helicopter and tell them what they're going to arrive at, basically. But we also teach that the next man down takes over should that happen to myself, and that's exactly what did, and I'm thankful to this day for the amazing job they did. As they got me back to the base and we awaited the helicopter, I believe it was about 9 minutes before it arrived, which was really quickly. I remember a close friend of mine who was back in the base came out to help, and I asked him if I'd lost my legs, because I just knew, I guess. And he told me the truth that they had. I was unaware of sort of all the other injuries that I was going to have to wake up to eventually, but I was definitely conscious and knowing that my legs had been severely injured or gone. The helicopter arrived and the paramedics on the back got hold of me. At this point, they're supposed to knock you out, basically, so you're easier to treat and not writhing around. I became the patient from hell and refused to be knocked out. People asked me what I was thinking. The only thing I can remember thinking, I wasn't sort of worried about dying or thinking what can I tell my family or any of that. I was just thinking, just stay awake and you're alive, you're all right. And I guess that's why I fought with them, to not let them knock me out. I remember them putting a mask over my face for the oxygen, and I was throwing that off because it just felt like it was harder to breathe with it on. So yeah, I was just being a general pain in the bum, I think, to the people that were trying to help me. But at the same time, I wasn't stopping them from doing the jobs, I was just making it a bit more difficult. And again, they did an amazing job of patching me up and I was back to Bastion in about another 9 minutes later. So, you know, in under 20 minutes, I was back in the main camp with the surgeons, and apparently they were horrified that I was still awake, and the people on the helicopter got a bit of a telling off because I was still conscious. And at that point, that's where they sort of whacked me full of whatever they do, and out I went. And the next bit was actually the easiest bit for me. I had 3 weeks sleep, essentially, and woke up back in Birmingham. For my family and friends and stuff, that was probably the worst time, because they didn't know if I was ever going to wake up and in what condition I was going to be in if I woke up. I was told on the flight back to the UK that I had to be resuscitated twice, so that sort of tells you how close it was. But yeah, I woke up back in intensive care, back in Birmingham, and my family were around me, and that's where I suppose I began a long journey of rehabilitation and recovery. 4 months in the hospital, that was the worst time, definitely. More so because there's only so many visiting hours, and the rest of it is just time to think about everything. And of course, like all human beings, you overthink things, and you presume you know the answers to things that you don't know the answer to. For example, I thought I'd never drive again, certainly never swim again. You know, so many things that I'd just never do again. And then the reality of it now is that I can do, you know, all those things and much more. And but it was difficult in the hospital, just trying to envision that future, I guess.
Yeah.
I had a great family who were there for me throughout, and that was a massive thing. And they were helped by charities to be able to stay there with me. And you know, that's where I suppose I first became aware of the great role that charities can take for myself and the families. And you just sort of work to get out of that hospital bed until you head to Headley Court, which was the rehabilitation centre. And once you get there, the world kind of changes, because you're seeing people with similar injuries, but they're rock climbing, and they're doing all sorts of mad things, and they're starting to drive around the place and things like that. And all of a sudden you think, well, if he can do it, you know, he's a para, I'm better than him, so I'll definitely be able to do it, and things like that. And the whole regimental rivalry thing kicks in, and you're there with people who've been through it, who you can talk to. The welfare staff and the physios and the gym staff and everything are geared towards getting you better. And it does that massively, gives you a positive outlook on the future. And then it's just sort of a matter of time of working towards getting to where you want to be. And for me, it was always about getting my independence back. I went from literally having to be washed and you know, going to the toilet in a bedpan on the bed, and then having to be wiped afterwards, you know, which is difficult after you've been an independent man for a long time. But it was necessary, it just had to be done. And so then I wanted to get back out of that and be able to sit on the toilet myself. And you know, you take it for granted, but wiping your bum yourself is quite a nice thing to do after you've not been able to do it, things like that. You know, your own hygiene and all sorts. And you know, now years later, looking back, I'm in a place where I live on my own. You know, cook, clean, wash, everything really. My family's still there to support me if needed, but I'm so stubborn that I don't accept that very often, and that's helped at times as well. But I'm certainly in a great place now, and it's been a long journey, but a worthwhile one in the end.
It's great, and I guess, you know, you talk about the guys when you're at Headley Court and you're looking up to these guys that are rock climbing and doing other things. I guess there are other guys now looking at what you're doing and how you're, you know, taking on life, and I guess they're finding that inspiring as well, which is, you know,
I hope so. I'd like to think that you know, just getting on with it is the way I see it for me. But you know, I do my talks and things, and people say to you, inspirational is a word that gets thrown at me quite a lot, and I don't really see it, but I do understand how it might come across that way. So as much as I don't want to admit it, I suppose I do get it as well, and I appreciate it a lot when they say it.
And one thing we find at Scotty's is obviously we spend a lot of time with families, with bereaved families, and one thing they cry out for is that reconnection to the military. And what we find is when we speak to the guys, there are maybe feelings of guilt, or they're not quite sure about approaching the family. Are you still in touch with like the medics and the guys that helped you when you were injured? Have you found that they've found it helpful to kind of to reconnect?
Yes, absolutely. In particular, one of the medics that was on the helicopter that picked me up, she was obviously doing that job and seeing casualties like me day in, day out, on multiple tours. And she contacted me a couple of years after I'd been injured and stuff, and asked me questions like, was it the right thing to do to save me? Because I was severely injured, and was my life happy? Was I glad that I was still here, and things like that. And obviously all that was going around in her mind. Very quickly, my answer was just simply, yeah, I'm glad, I'm here. I couldn't ask for anything more, and I've managed to, get back to a great, rewarding and happy life. I have my difficult days, but I mean, who doesn't? Whether you've been injured or not, life sometimes throws you a curveball, shall we say, and you've got to get through it. But yeah, it was really good for her, I think, to reconnect with me and be told straight out, yes, you did an amazing job, and I can never repay her, to be honest, for that, and all the team that was on the back of there. I've been lucky to meet a few of them. But it does help. There's a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder and things about, and people who've gone through loss of family members and things like that, and I do think it does help for us to reconnect or connect with people who've gone through similar things, because only they can understand certain parts of that journey. I wouldn't pretend to understand what it feels like to have lost a father, or a husband, or whatever it might be. That's different to what I've been through, but I'd like to think I can also empathise with it, and there are certain similarities to the journey that I've taken and the journey that they will have to take to come through it. Yeah. So yeah, reconnecting, I think, is an essential part of being able to get on with it, I think, and move past it.
Definitely, and I guess talking openly about any issue, whether it's mental health issues or whatever. I know you've been quite proactive, and you set up the Facebook group, Quick Reaction Friends, to encourage people to kind of share if they're feeling a bit down. And then I've seen myself the number of people that will kind of jump on that and go, like, we're here to support you, and that side of things.
Yeah, the group was just, I mean, unfortunately, I've been to 2 funerals in the past couple of months of soldiers who've taken their own lives, and I mean, it's a difficult one because soldiers are taught not to show weakness, and so they don't want to talk to people and admit they need help and things like that. But hopefully the group can give them a platform to be able to open up with other soldiers that are going through similar things, or there's people like me that are on there who have had the different journey, but I'll help as much as I can, whether that means driving 200 miles to go and have a coffee with someone, or whatever it might be. And the group's, I think there's 2,000 plus members now, and there's loads of people offering help, support, advice, and then there's other people who've been able to just open up a little bit, and that's been fantastic. And I hope it continues as it does, and hopefully it will help. Even if it saves one person from taking their own life, it's a success. But hopefully it can do more than that.
Definitely, yeah. It feels like we're nowhere near where we need to be at the moment, but we're things like this are moving in the right direction. There seems to be more openness to kind of talk about these things now.
It does. I think mental health, in particular, in life in general, for civilian or military, is becoming. Or we're becoming more aware of it, that it is a thing. No more is it, oh, you're being weak and get up, man up and things like that. Because as common as that sort of has been in life, because I mean I've said it many a time, come on, man up, get on with it. But actually, we need to just be a bit more, helpful and a bit more open to talking about and trying to get them to open up about the problems.
Rick, you mentioned earlier about some of the charities that helped you, and I know you've done a lot of fundraising for a number of charities, but you've also been connected to Scotties and supporting Scotties Little Soldiers for some time now, which I think is amazing, because as I say, there are charities out there that have directly helped you, but for you to also give something to a charity that you don't have a direct, you're not a direct beneficiary of, I think is pretty amazing. But what is it that I guess kind of first got you involved in Scotties, but also keeps you coming back after all these years?
The first time I became aware of Scotties was at the Millie Awards, and Scotties was up for a nominee, and I was there because I'd actually been nominated for one myself, so I was lucky enough to see Scotties win the award and to hear about more of what they did. And the more that I heard, the more I got to speak to Nikki, and I just became massively aware that it was a fantastic charity and just did so much good. Unfortunately, because of my injuries, I can't have children, but I've always been heavily involved with my nieces and nephews, and I've got a few godchildren. I think people seem to think I'd be an all right parent, or you'd think so if I've been nominated as a godfather. So it's something that I've missed from my life, but something that I'm aware of, and there's a big piece of my heart for children, and to see the massive great work that Scotties does is fantastic. And I immediately just wanted to know more and become involved. That then obviously started the ball rolling for doing some fundraising, and then attending the annual ball, I've got to know more and more of sort of the wider Scottish family, if you will, I guess. And the more I get to know, the more I want to be involved. That's all I can say, really. It's amazing what they do for the children. I think it was a severe gap, I suppose, in the charity sector that was missing, and Nikki spotted that and done an amazing job with a team of making sure that the support is there for them. And I love seeing all the children's parties and stuff, and the smiles on the children's faces and stuff like that. It's wonderful, and long may it continue. And as long as Scotties is going, I'll be helping and doing what I can.
Great, thanks. And well, on that subject, let's talk about the skydive then. So you've signed up to take part in the first Scotties Jump Day. So tell us a little bit about that then.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to doing the skydive. I was talking with Nikki recently, actually, and saying I think I've lost the gene that gives you fear or makes you worried about doing things. So I'm always up for doing anything. And I saw the skydive and thought, what a fantastic way of being able to kind of do something a bit more difficult, a bit out there, but at the same time, more importantly, raise some funds for Scotties. So I'm looking forward to being there. Hopefully there'll be plenty of others up for it, and I'm quite happy to kick anyone out the door. Well, I say kick, I might have to shove really, but yeah, I'll be happy to be at the back shoving people out the door, making sure they do it and stuff. But yeah, it's just the next thing on the line to do for Scotties, and I'm sure there'll be many more after that as well.
Yeah, well, on that subject, what does the future hold? What are you up to? What are your plans?
My immediate sort of plans, I definitely want to do another swim. A couple of years ago I did the Great Manchester Swim, which is a mile in open water, and I want to do the 2 mile, I think, but it'll probably be next year now with booking things and such. So that's definitely one. But me and Nikki have been talking for a while. We need to come up with a big challenge, I think, something together. So my brain needs to get in gear and come up with something really big, and something that can raise a few thousand for Scotties as opposed to a few hundred here and there, I think. Yeah. So I can't give you any definitive answers, but watch this space, I think, is the best thing I can tell you.
Awesome. And if anyone wants to follow your progress and hear about any of these fundraising ideas or anything, are you on social media or?
I'm on Facebook, yeah. So you can get me on there and stuff. And then I'm sure Scotties will be promoting most of the things I do anyway. So get yourself on Scotties' website and have a look.
Awesome. Okay, Rick. Thanks for coming along to talk to us today. It's really inspiring, and really appreciate you making the trip over to Scotties. Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And if you are interested in seeing any of our other On the Scotty Couch videos, head over to our YouTube channel and take a look. Thank you.